Curiosities of the Sky 01, The Windows of Absolute Night.
Chapter 1 of Curiosities of the Sky. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Roger Moline. Curiosities of the Sky by Garrett Serviss. Chapter 1. The Windows of Absolute Night. To most minds, mystery is more fascinating than science. But when science itself leads straight up to the borders of mystery, and there comes to a dead stop, saying, "At present I can no longer see my way," the force of the charm is redoubled. On the other hand, the illimitable is no less potent in mystery than the invisible, whence the dramatic effect of Keats' stout Cortez staring at the boundless Pacific while all his men look at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. It is with similar feelings that the astronomer regards certain places where from the peaks of the universe his vision seems to range out into endless empty space. He sees there the shore of his little isthmus, and beyond, unexplored immensity. The name coal sacks given to these strange voids is hardly descriptive. Rather, they produce upon the mind the effect of blank windows in a lonely house on a pitch-dark night, which, when looked at from the brilliant interior, become appalling in their rayless murk. Infinity seems to acquire a new meaning in the presence of these black openings in the sky, for as one continues to gaze, it loses its purely metaphysical quality and becomes a kind of entity, like the ocean. The observer is conscious that he can actually see the beginning of its ebon depths, in which the visible universe appears to float like an enchanted island, resplendent within with lights and life and gorgeous spectacles, and encircled with screens of crowded stars, but with its dazzling vistas ending at the fathomless sea of pure darkness which encloses all. The galaxy, or Milky Way, surrounds the borders of our island in space like a stellar garland, and when openings appear in it they are, by contrast, far more impressive than the general darkness of the interstellar expanse seen in other directions. Yet even that expanse is not everywhere equally dark, for it contains gloomy deeps, discernible with careful watching. Here, too, contrast plays an important part, though less striking than within the galactic region. Some of Sir William Herschel's observations appear to indicate an association between these tenebrious spots and neighboring star clouds and nebula. It is an illuminating bit of astronomical history that when he was sweeping the then virgin heavens with his great telescopes, he was accustomed to say to his sister, who, notebook in hand, waited at his side to take down his words, fresh with the inspiration of discovery: "Prepare to write. The nebula are coming. Here space is vacant." The most famous of the coal sacks, and the first to be brought to general attention before astronomers had awakened to the significance of such things, lies adjacent to the Southern Cross, and is truly an amazing phenomenon. It is not alone the conspicuousness of this celestial vacancy, opening suddenly in the midst of one of the richest parts of the galaxy, that has given it its fame, but quite as much the superstitious awe with which it was regarded by the early explorers of the South Seas. To them, as well as to those who listened in rapt wonder to their tales, the coal sacks seemed to possess some occult connection with the mystic cross. In the eyes of the sailors it was not a vacancy so much as a sable reality in the sky, and as, shuddering, they stared at it, they piously crossed themselves. It was another of the magical wonders of the unknown South, and as such it formed the basis of many a wild surmise and many a sea dog's yarn. Scientific investigation has not diminished its prestige, and today no traveler in the southern hemisphere is indifferent to its fascinating strangeness, while some find it the most impressive spectacle of the Antarctic heavens. All around, up to the very edge of the yawning gap, the sheen of the Milky Way is surpassingly glorious, but there, as if in obedience to an almighty edict, everything vanishes. A single faint star is visible within the opening, producing a curious effect upon the sensitive spectator, like the sight of a tiny islet in the midst of a black, motionless, waveless tarn. The dimensions of the lagoon of darkness, which is oval or pear-shaped, are 8 degrees by 5, so that it occupies a space in the sky about 130 times greater than the area of the full moon. It attracts attention as soon as the eye is directed toward the quarter where it exists, and by virtue of the rarity of such phenomena it appears a far greater wonder than the drifts of stars that are heaped around it. Now that observatories are multiplying in the southern hemisphere, the great austral coal sack will, no doubt, receive attention proportioned to its importance as one of the most significant features of the sky. Already at the Sydney Observatory, photographs have shown that the southern portion of this dead sea of space is not quite bottomless, although its northern part defies the longest sounding lines of the astronomer. There is a similar but less perfect coal sack in the northern hemisphere, in the constellation of the Swan, which, strange to say, also contains a well-marked figure of a cross outlined by stars. This gap lies near the top of the cross-shaped figure. It is best seen by averted vision, which brings out the contrast with the Milky Way, which is quite brilliant around it. It does not, however, exercise the same weird attraction upon the eye as the southern coal sack, for instead of looking like an absolute void in the sky, it rather appears as if a canopy of dark gauze had been drawn over the stars. We shall see the possible significance of this appearance later. Just above the southern horizon of our northern middle latitudes, in summer, where the Milky Way breaks up into vast sheets of nebulous luminosity, lying over and between the constellations Scorpio and Sagittarius, there is a remarkable assemblage of coal sacks, though none is of great size. One of them, near a conspicuous star cluster in Scorpio, M80, is interesting for having been the first of these strange objects noted by Herschel. Probably it was its nearness to M80 which suggests to his mind the apparent connection of such vacancies with star clusters which we have already mentioned. But the most marvelous of the coal sacks are those that have been found by photography in Sagittarius. One of Bernard's earliest and most excellent photographs includes 2 of them, both in the star cluster M8. The larger, which is roughly rectangular in outline, contains one little star, and its smaller neighbor is lune-shaped, surely a most singular form for such an object. Both are associated with curious dark lanes running through the clustered stars like trails in the woods. Along the borders of these lanes the stars are ranked in parallel rows, and what may be called the bottoms of the lanes are not entirely dark, but pebbled with faint stellar points. One of them, which skirts the 2 dark gaps and traverses the cluster along its greatest diameter, is edged with lines of stars, recalling the alignment of the trees bordering a French highway. This road of stars cannot be less than many billions of miles in length. All about the cluster, the bed of the galaxy is strangely disturbed, and in places nearly denuded, as if its contents had been raked away to form the immense stack and the smaller accumulations of stars around it. The well-known Trifid Nebula is also included in the field of the photograph, which covers a truly marvelous region, so intricate in its mingling of nebula, star clusters, star swarms, star streams, and dark vacancies that no description can do it justice. Yet, chaotic as it appears, there is an unmistakable suggestion of unity about it, impressing the beholder with the idea that all the different parts are in some way connected and have not been fortuitously thrown together. Miss Agnes M. Clerk made the striking remark that the dusky lanes in M8 are exemplified on the largest scale in the great rift dividing the Milky Way, from Cygnus in the northern hemisphere all the way to the Cross in the southern. Similar lanes are found in many other clusters, and they are generally associated with flanking rows of stars, resembling in their arrangement the thick-set houses and villas along the roadways that traverse the approaches to a great city. But to return to the black gaps. Are they really windows in the star walls of the universe? Some of them look rather as if they had been made by a shell fired through a luminous target, allowing the eye to range through the hole into the void space beyond. If science is discreetly silent about these things, what can the more venturesome and less responsible imagination suggest? Would a huge runaway sun, like Arcturus for instance, make such an opening if it should pass like a projectile through the Milky Way? It is at least a stimulating inquiry. Being probably many thousands of times more massive than the galactic stars, such a stellar missile would not be stopped by them, though its direction of flight might be altered. It would drag the small stars lying close to its course out of their spheres, but the ultimate tendency of its attraction would be to sweep them around in its wake, thus producing rather a star swarm than a vacancy. Those that were very close to it might be swept away in its rush and become its satellites, careering away with it in its flight into outer space. But those that were farther off, and they would, of course, greatly outnumber the nearer ones, would tend inward from all sides toward the line of flight, as dust and leaves collect behind a speeding motor, though the forces operating would be different, and would fill up the hole, if hole it were. A swarm thus collected should be rounded in outline and bordered with a relatively barren ring from which the stars had been sucked away. In a general sense, the M8 cluster answers to this description, but even if we undertook to account for its existence by a supposition like the above, the black gaps would remain unexplained unless one could make a further draft on the imagination and suggest that the stars had been thrown into a vast eddy or system of eddies whose vortices appear as dark holes. Only a maelstrom-like motion could keep such a...
Se você gostou desse vídeo, já sabe, né? Deixa o like, se inscreve no canal e ativa o sininho para não perder nenhuma novidade. Um beijo, fiquem com Deus e até a próxima. Fui!